Hey guys, welcome back for another interview series with Band Director Survival Guide. So today we've got Carrie Salisbury coming on to join us. And Carrie is a very accomplished violinist and music educator based out of LA. And when the pandemic hit back in mid-March, she had to convert her live teaching studio into an online music studio in less than a week. And not only did she do it, she's actually thriving through the whole process. And I hope you guys really enjoy this amazing resource. She's got so many great tips and tricks and so much great tech advice for how to really be impactful. And not only that, she's really unlocked a beautiful mindset for how to set forth into this new frontier. So I hope you enjoy her words as much as I did and as much as Katie did. So you can find Carrie at Strings Pop is her website, stringspop.com, and she's also on YouTube at Strings Pop. And you can follow us at Band Director Survival Guide at banddirectorsurvivalguide.com, and then Band Director Survival Guide on Facebook and Instagram. And so we hope you enjoy this interview, and we'll see you for the next one tomorrow with recording.la, 5 p.m. Central. So enjoy this great interview with Carrie Salisbury.
Hi, we're here today with Carrie Salisbury, and she is the operator of Jerona Rose Music Studio in Los Angeles. And she also runs a program called Strings Pop, which is fully online, and her students are totally loving it. So, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Carrie, and what you do?
Yeah, totally. I'm a string teacher. I teach violin and viola, and I live in Los Angeles. So I do a combination of all kinds of teaching, studio teaching and group teaching and individuals and gig around Los Angeles and have kind of retooled my whole approach to music in the last 5 months, as have lots of you. So I've lived here and run my studio for the last 15 years in person and with traditional traditional models of seeing people in person and having group classes and concerts and whatnot. And then when the pandemic shut my state down, we all pivoted to online teaching. So that I'm here to talk about how I pivoted to an online platform. And then when all of our students' summer music camps got canceled because we're not gathering in groups or we're not traveling outside our neighborhoods, I thought, well, there's going to be a whole bunch of bummed out teenagers that they didn't get to go to music camp this summer. So my husband and I worked together to create a totally virtual online music camp called Strings Pop. It's a 2 week camp. I'm in the middle of it right now. It's a 2 week camp for teenagers, and I added, because of the high demand for middle schoolers, I added a tweens session. So there's students as young as 11 in my program, and they are learning about recording, chord theory, music arranging, creating music videos in the genre of like a pop music topic. So it's all great classical skills and it's all great like musicianship skills for you would want for life, and it's done under the umbrella of a pop music course.
Wow, that's
That's great.
exciting. Good for you. Yeah,
I
I need
know.
to look at doing that.
Yeah.
Totally, to connect with the students. That's awesome. All right, so we have some questions that we'd like to ask you. So I'm going to start with the first one here. So, how did the pandemic affect your studio? And then what did you do to kind of change over to the online realm?
Yeah, it was a little nutty. I mean, I was in here, it was Friday afternoon. I was looking at the parents and the news was kind of breaking at that moment, and I said, I might not see you next week. It was very uncertain. There was not a lot of who knew what was going to happen next. And so my kids went to school on Friday, and I saw my Friday students. I said, well, something might be different next week. And that's when everything kind of shut down all at once. The water turned off, so to speak. And so we all had to pivot basically overnight or over a weekend. For us, for my studio, the very next week was our scheduled off week. It was a spring break in March. And so during that whole week, I just went back to the drawing board as far as teaching innovation goes. And I thought, okay, how are we going to make this work? Because we still have to show up for these children. one of the mindsets that I like to think about in teaching is what are the student outcomes going to be? What challenges are they facing? What resources do they have? And how can I continue reaching them? There was an article that I read that was really deeply impactful that described this as an adverse childhood event for our students. There's a loss of learning, there's a loss of community, there's a loss of ritual in their lives, and that to the extent possible that teachers are able to maintain contact with their students, build community for their students, help the students feel that they're not as isolated as they feel. I mean, I feel isolated. I haven't left my house or my neighborhood for a long time. But I think when I took about a week to reinvent my teaching strategies, and here we are running everything fully online for the last 5 months.
Wow, that's amazing.
That's
Good
amazing.
for you. Did you have any students drop out because they didn't see value in online lessons? Or did everyone? No. Oh my
It's
gosh.
amazing.
That is incredible.
I was running a pretty strong studio before, and I have since I've almost doubled the number of students that I've reached over the summer, including my camp. But in addition, I have added new private students, which is a whole different conversation about how to start a beginner online lessons, but that's not really your audience. No, I didn't lose a single one. And the predominant thing that I'm hearing back from parents is thank you so much for working to figure out a way for our kids to still do this. We didn't want our children to leave music. We didn't want them to lose their school friends and their classes and their music. We didn't want them to lose everything all at once. We're so glad that they still have music. We're so glad that you are making this available for them. And so I have really devoted myself to making it work for them. I've been devoted to their successful outcomes, and nobody has even whispered of leaving. I think also your question a little bit about perceived value, like if we are to take what was a typical in-person lesson or a typical in-person band practice or a typical in-person anything, and if we are trying to take that old, not old, but different venue or strategy or context, and if we are just trying to put that online, we're going to be very unsuccessful because they're not going to transfer straight across. It's not going to work that way. It is a completely new medium. It's a completely new arena. The thing that we take with us, the thing that drives all of this is that as teachers, we're lifelong learners. I didn't know anything about online teaching 5 months ago, but I'm a learner.
Wow.
Because I'm a teacher, I'm also a learner, and if I can learn something, I can teach something. And so I figured out what I needed to know, and I innovated from there. And I wasn't stuck in this idea of the way I used to do it in person is the way I have to do it online, because it doesn't translate. They're totally different approaches. I like the metaphor of an artist, right? As teachers, I would consider myself an artist. My art is connecting to my students or connecting to their families or building community. In my heart, that's my art. And I imagine if I were an artist, maybe on this day I'm going to paint a watercolor, and I'm going to use a lot of water and paints that dissolve on the paper. And tomorrow I'm going to paint an oil painting. I'm not going to use as much water. I'm not going to use the same kind of paint, or I'm going to get a whole mess. And so in my heart and with my art as a teacher, I feel like it's a shift in how we see the craft. Like watercolor teaching over here, oil paint teaching over here. Don't mix up the kinds of paint, but the concepts are the same and the art is expressed in the same way. And I'm the artist, so I can make it however I want.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. There's
I like
definitely
that.
a lot of freedom in this this new medium because it's kind of a new frontier. So there's a lot of freedom to experiment and explore, all the different options that are out there because there are a lot of options
It's
for
it's
tools.
kind of like there's no wrong way to do it. Nobody
Yeah.
has yet discovered what the wrong way is. So all you have is just a bunch of right ways we can do it. Yeah, I think so too.
Totally.
Yeah, it's a great way to flip it because I think a lot of people think everything about it is wrong. So it's nice to flip it around and say there's so many great ways to make this even better. So
Yeah, you hit that right on the head because if our impression of online teaching is that it's just a poor substitute for in-person teaching, then we've gone about it all wrong. We have to see online teaching as its own entity, right? And are there not challenges to in-person teaching? Yes, there's a ton of challenges to in-person teaching. Your student can't come if they're sick. They can't come if they miss the bus or if they live too far away. There's a dozen different challenges for what happens with in-person teaching, and we have figured out over generations how to mitigate those and how to work around those. There are different challenges for online teaching solved in the same kind of way. In fact, one of the things that I did in my week off before I revamped and went to wholly online, one of the things I did was take kind of like an inventory of everything I had, almost like a giant pros cons list, right? So I had what is wonderful and good and important about in-person teaching that I have to have, that I have to keep, what is unique to in-person teaching that I probably can't replicate, and what are the things I don't like about in-person teaching that I could probably get rid of. And then by the same token, for the online teaching, what are the inherent advantages to this situation? Not that it's some poor substitute for in-person teaching, but what are the actual advantages? What does it have to gain? And what resources do my students have to make this successful? So obviously, like one of those pros, or one of the downsides to switching to online teaching is it makes ensemble playing kind of difficult, but it doesn't make ensemble learning difficult. Simultaneous synchronous playing, yeah, okay, that's really best achieved in person. But synchronous learning is happening. You can all learn together if you can't exact play on the same beat together. So that's a transfer over that I have found. I can talk more about my pro con list if you want. I have a feeling we'll loop back around to it.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about what you use to kind of create that ensemble experience for students? Do you have apps or things that you use to either make a video before, then everyone plays to it, or what do you do?
Yeah, I think prioritizing student outcomes in this just has to be top of mind for all of us all the time. And when I'm prioritizing student outcomes, high on my list is that they still retain a sense of community. Because if music isn't like the great community builder, what brings us all together, like what is it? So it must retain that sense of community. And to that end, as a teacher, I'm making sure that I'm prioritizing the student experience in all of this. Sometimes at my own like discomfort, right? Like I don't like sitting in a chair to teach all day. I like to stand up and move around the room, but for my students and for their community outcome, I will keep parked in one spot and teach to the computer. But to your question about what we can do to make that learning, that playing together, yes. How many of our students, when we're in person, we just play in person because it's available to us. That's all we know. How many of our teenagers, middle schoolers or high schoolers, how many of them have actually devoted themselves to the art form of recording your own playing? I mean, I think I was probably in college before I recorded my own playing very frequently. I don't know about you, you're nodding, right? So
Yeah, same.
so recording oneself as a musician is like this incredibly valuable musicianship skill. And because we're in person and because we're just rehearsing, maybe we don't utilize that recording technology as frequently as we could to our own advantage. So one of the things I think about online learning that has kind of required us to grow in this direction or required us to innovate in this direction is this recording aspect, right? The students that by sheer necessity, we're passing back and forth videos to each other. Maybe someone's recording an excerpt and they're sending it in. Maybe someone records one duet part and sends it to their duet partner and they record the other and then they add them together. And so recording has to be a part of this in one way or another. And there are tons of apps that are coming out and that are easy to use. My students are having a lot of success using Acapella app. It's only available on iOS devices, so there's some accessibility issue with that. But there's also a browser program called Upbeat Music app. And we're not even talking about exclusively video content, right? If you use open source materials like Audacity, that's just an open source audio recording program, audio only, so it doesn't sync up to video, but the same effect, right? If you were going to play part one and you record it all the way through, and then part two, you can layer it back on and you can hear yourself play back. If we're talking about a student's learning outcomes, holy smokes.
Yeah.
Recording yourself and learning from what you just did and learning to hear yourself play back was really valuable. And one of the things I've done a lot more of with online teaching than I ever did with in-person teaching. And I'm kind of looking back, I'm like, wow, I was really slacking on making my students record themselves, seeing as how important it has been for them now and how much they become self-assessing, like how much they want to hear themselves back. I have this one teenager, he was a junior this last year, and he was just kind of a free thinker. He's just like a free musician, kind of hard to contain. He hadn't done that since his whole childhood. And I was working with him on a recording a couple months ago, and I was just kind of like, pandemic was brand new. I was just kind of like sitting back. I'm like, okay, what did you think of that? And he's like, no, that's not good enough. I got to redo that. And I was blown away that this student who was normally kind of maybe not really as attentive to his own playing, all of a sudden became like, like laser
Yeah.
focus into his playing. And from there, he was listening to himself in a totally different way. He's like, oh, I rushed there, didn't I? I'm like, mm-hmm. Oh man, I was out of tune there, didn't I? Mm-hmm. And it
Yeah.
Yeah.
actually made my commentary to him, like I didn't have to say as much. He heard what he needed to improve. So yes, recording, online teaching this year is going to be about developing those recording skills
Yeah.
in communities and groups, individuals, teacher to student, whatever way we get it, it's going to be a big piece.
I think it's
Wow.
amazing too, the opportunity that that brings for students to engage in recorded deliberate practice, but also making videos through a cappella. Like they get the opportunity to play with the click track and to sync stuff up. I mean, a lot of musicians, the first time they work with a click track is at their first recording session, and it's really nerve-wracking the first time because you're not used to doing that, or playing drums at church, you'd play with a click track, and all of a sudden it's a totally different feel. So having students be able to engage in that early on is really powerful and opens up their ears to a whole different way of learning. It's amazing.
Yeah,
So
I totally agree. We try to teach our kids how to play with metronome. Even learning how to play with metronome in the first place is a learning
yeah,
curve for younger ones. And then playing it with right in your ear, and you have to line up with, and it's recorded. The click track is a big skill. And
Yeah.
the
yeah.
cool thing is that they're learning it way earlier than I ever did, and they're getting really successful outcomes with it. So hey, let's go for it.
Totally. All right, let's see what other questions we have here. Okay, so
Maybe.
I'm interested to know how you're running your group classes right now.
Mm.
Like, I guess, yeah, what is the structure or how are you going into it? What's your prep before? What do you do?
Yeah, great question. Well, my group class students know each other. They love each other. Them seeing each other and play with each other and talk to each other is kind of one of my big priorities. So that's a huge community aspect. So we can't take out our group teaching. We can't take out our group class learning because they need to see each other. And what are some of the challenges? Well, we can't have like, it's not as easy, I should say. I got to be really careful with those I can'ts. Those are limiting. I got to circle back to your question in just a second. But one of the very first things I did in that week off was I made a huge list of all the things I believed that I couldn't do. You can't do online teaching because you can't assess the sound as well. You can't do online teaching. You can't teach a student online because you can't touch and adjust their posture physically. You can't do online teaching because you can't play together. You can't play duets. You can't this. You can't that. I was just like, I heard every mean and nasty teacher that had ever said something terrible about online teaching. I just like let them in, and I wrote down every single mean or nasty I can't thing that I'd ever heard anyone say. And I was like, okay, I'm an innovator and I'm a teacher. So all of these are the problems, these teachers have rightly addressed something that they think is an issue with online teaching. So what's the solution? What's the counter option? What's the other alternative? And I took that long list of can'ts and I just like I was not going to be limited in my approach to working with my students by what I believed or what other people had told me that I couldn't do. So I need to be careful about what I mean when I say can'ts. There are inherent challenges that I was used to in my group teaching playing together, for example, dividing into duet parts or trio parts. That's more challenging in a latency situation, right? Our online transmissions are not yet real time. There's latency involved, but not everybody realizes that. They expect that if I play a note, you hear it at the exact same time that I'm playing it. But we have these latency measurements that it's it's milliseconds apart, sometimes a second apart in the transfer of information. They're getting faster and better, but there is latency, so we don't play as synchronized together. So I do a couple different things. I've written a few articles about it too. I think classroom management in the group is really important, and I've always with all of my groups I create an order of names. So sometimes we go alphabetically, sometimes we go by birthday order, so that they know who's before and who's after them, kind of like standing in a virtual line. And quite often, one of the things we'll work on is we'll take a segment or a passage or a scale or a piece divided up by bars or phrases, and we play it or we practice it and we pass it around in the order of names. I think that's a really great one because then they're sort of silently touching along. Sorry, I'm gesturing violin. I should. They're touching and gesturing along, and then when they know that they're up in the rotation, then they play their bit. Then they touch and gesture along, and then they play their bit. So that's one way that I work in the group class because I want them their brains to still be engaged, and I want them to come in on time. Another way is to prepare recordings or videos prior to the class beginning, and then from the Zoom window, sharing that with the computer audio to everybody's houses simultaneously. So what I've learned is that I can share an audio track that I've created, and I can lead or conduct or direct in whatever way. I will probably mute all their microphones so that there's not a giant cacophony of sound. But I can broadcast my track and I can conduct or I can cue with my body. I can nod. I can still talk into my own microphone. What they're hearing then is a practice track that I've made. It's me recording all the parts usually, or a professional recording, and then they play along. It simulates their group class experience because they're playing along with the piano accompaniment, or they're playing along with what sounds like other violins in this case, in my case, and I can still conduct. And I can still show a lot of my cues. I can still show dynamic cues. I can still show rhythmic things. So sometimes giving them what is sort of like a virtual orchestra or a virtual band to play with by way of broadcasting that audio signal from the computer you're using as a source material, I think it's really helpful. So I can broadcast just audio and I can keep my video on me and I can do all the instruction and teaching from there.
That's amazing.
Wow.
So I think one thing a lot of people would like to know is kind of the technology behind all these achievements, maybe how
Yeah.
your studio's set up
Oh, yeah,
or
totally. I'll show you a picture, in fact. When the pandemic hit, my studio was set up for in-person teaching, like many of their classrooms set up for in-person teaching, right? And so uh, that meant that when the pandemic hit, we just had to scramble. We all had to scramble. Like, oh, what am I going to use for a camera? Oh, what am I going to use for a microphone? Oh no, what kind of microphone should I get? And we all feel so panicked because the highest priority is that we're sending out a good audio signal and a good video signal to our students, right? We want them to be able to hear us. We want them to be able to get a sense of our tone and our voice and everything. So I set up the studio at first with what I had on hand, and it was like cobbled together. It was kind of scrappy. And after I realized that that was not what I had on hand was not the most effective way going forward, I did a little bit of research with microphones, and I tweaked my desk setup. One of the things that I noticed is that I shouldn't, as the teacher, I should, as much little as possible, leave the frame of the class, right? Because if I go over to the filing cabinet to grab music out of a folder, I've essentially like, Mrs. Salisbury has been holding. And if I'm not in the frame, I might as well not be there to the student. They're not paying attention if I'm out of the frame. And so the the way that I've adapted to that is I've made sure that all my lesson materials are available like in my arm's reach. They're in drawers right next to me. I'll show you what my studio looks like right now. Um, and then another thing that I've adapted is how, I'm sorry, it's gonna take a second to pull up. I'm
Oh,
gonna
that's great. That's great.
strange in your video feed. I've adapted so that
Wow.
at some point I could transition to seeing students back in person when that's going to happen for us. But what you'll see here is my teaching setup for the technology. So this is where I am right now, sitting at this desk. So it's not quite the same technology. I've reconfigured my microphones in a different way, but the camera, which is capturing me, and the computer screen, right, and the iPad and the microphones, and I think the metronome is there, the speaker is there, the keyboard, and my instruments, and then in the drawers I have all the things I'm going to need for the lesson so that I don't have to leave where I'm sitting. So I think setting up our teaching station with everything we need so that we can stay in the frame to be successful is really valuable. And we all have to think about how we're going to reconfigure our classrooms and our offices to make that work.
Wow. Yeah, that looks great in there.
That's nice.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think a lot of people they see all that tech and they get a little overwhelmed, especially when it comes to, how do you get multiple camera angles, or how are you going to actually integrate this technology to make your teaching effective. So thanks for showing that.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to show you right now, but one that I really like using is this second little webcam. So I don't know. I'm certain that for brass and wind instruments, I'm not as familiar. Sorry, guys, but I have one camera angle just for my front shot, and then this little webcam is I'll show you. It has a twisty neck, and then this is
Oh.
my left-hand close-up cam. So I will, in the stream, I will switch to a fingering that I'm using or a specific technique I'm trying to demonstrate. I'm just going to switch to that camera angle, and so then everybody sees exactly what this camera is capturing. Having a second webcam on something else is really useful, or even having it set up so that it's if you have your teaching camera and then you have a second webcam with facing at like a projector. It can work like a projector. You can screen share from the iPad all kinds of I screen share music to my students all the time, every single lesson. That's one of those advantages, right? So we talk about the advantages of in-person versus online teaching. Online teaching, you have visual teaching that you can do in such a different way, with all the way you can work your camera angles and the ways that you can share materials visually on the screen to the student, rather than just saying, okay, now look on your music and find bar 12. Okay, do you see that C sharp on bar 12? Okay, circle that C sharp. No, no, I pull up the score on my screen, I circle the C sharp, mark that in your part. Okay, moving on. Um, so visual parts of the tech are really valuable, and setting up for your instrument specifically is, I think, something teachers can innovate.
Yeah, and that's something totally unique. Like being able to actually see that hand in a
Oh,
video is something that's hard to replicate in person. I think that's actually an advantage
right,
to online. And what's
right.
cool is you're recording those things. So if they need to see it again, it's not like sometimes, you'll have a profound teaching moment with a student one week and the next week they come back and they don't remember, or it gets lost somewhere throughout the
Mm.
week. And this way, like, the material is always present and available for them.
Yeah, I've had a lot of good luck with various online things like Google Classroom. I can post assignments and videos and PDFs to Google Classroom. I can, I've used a lot, I've done a lot more with YouTube than I ever did before, with just little teaching videos. It takes me 5 minutes. I'm like, okay, we're going to practice the G scale for right now. Here's the metronome. I'm going to play with you. And here's what I want you to do. I want you to slur two, then we're going to go to eighth notes. And so what I tell my students is in our real-time lessons, which is like right now we're having a real-time lesson. I'm going to teach you how to do this thing. And the way that you're going to practice it is you're going to pull up this YouTube video and you're going to pretend that I'm home with you and that we're just practicing together. So I've done a ton of practice videos that I've posted for my students that they use with me during the week. I cover the content with them at their lesson or at their group class, and then they have easy access to it to practice with during the week.
Yeah, that's great. Totally. Awesome. Okay, so I'm gonna go to another question here. Let's see. Okay, so just quickly, where can people find some articles that you've written about online teaching? We'll post all these things in the comments
Oh yeah, sure.
later. Where
I've
are they able
written
to find?
I've written a few. I wrote an article about studio setup. This is pre-remodel. You'll see pictures of the pre-remodel, and you'll see how I like cobbled together a whole disaster of a studio. I haven't yet updated it, but that's on violinist.com. I've also written a few things about group class teaching that I can post those. Those are on violinist.com as well, like the order of names and some of my different group class games. Oh, really fun group class game. I'm going to show you. I'm inspired to show you right now because
All
piano
right.
teachers will love this and teenagers think this is so funny. So we have this. I have this game that I play with them called Music or Food. And so this is just like, if you're working on an excerpt or you've just been playing some scales and you want like a 2-minute game, this is what you do. So I create a Zoom poll and I say, is this music or food? And so, for example, this is a caprese panini and this is a Paganini caprice.
Oh,
So,
Oh.
so in the Zoom call or in the Zoom poll, I set up music or food, and I put Caprese Panini, music or food. Paganini Caprice, music or food. And so all the kids are taking the poll in the class, and they think it's really fun. It takes 2 minutes. And
oh,
then after they take the poll, I say, "Oh, did you know that beef stroganoff is not the same as Rachmaninoff and broccolini or boccherini or vermicelli and verricini?" So we have this fun
that's so
little respite during group class when the kids just need to like not hold their instruments for just a second, but you still want some instruction and you still want to keep the lightheartedness of it. Music or food is one of the most fun games, and I just have images on my camera and I can screen share them anytime. And then then the students just get a little funniness and a little music history and music terminology. It's really delightful. So some of those
wow.
articles are there. Um, the resources that I've created as far as pop music arranging are I'm very proud of them. My husband made them. They're beautiful. They're graphically gorgeous, but available on stringspop.com. I've created guides, PDF guides for teachers. I have tutorials for teachers about how to teach your students to learn pop music arranging, what they need to do to understand chord theory and layering of tracks. And then I also have Instagram, Strings Pop on Instagram, where I post student projects of what they were able to do, like giving them a lead sheet, can they create a whole 6-part arrangement off a lead sheet, and most of them can after a couple days of the lesson. So those are great resources too, things I've written or things I've posted. And I have a lot of teacher resources too. I'll be doing a free teacher workshop for any teachers that want to learn, because remember, we're lifelong learners. Any teachers that want to learn about pop music arranging with the intention of using that in their class or using that with their private students. I have some free teacher training happening in the next couple of weeks. So you can also RSVP on my website for stuff like that.
That's amazing. And just so everyone knows, your website is geronarose.com, correct?
That's my studio website, and that is mostly like for my private students. If you
Ah,
want the
sorry.
pop music resources, go to stringspop.com. That's
Okay, and we'll post that in the comments as
Yeah,
well.
of course.
Wow.
That's amazing.
It's a great
I'll
resource.
probably come to that as
I
well.
You
I
know.
totally
mean,
should. It's very fun, and then you get these cross instrument group collaborations. That's wonderful. Yeah.
yeah,
I will send you my grids and I'll leave you
that's
three
great.
spaces for
That's
percussion.
great. That's great. Yeah, I think it's amazing. I think most people get into teaching because they love learning, and this is just a great opportunity for us to all learn a lot more. So
We're innovators, right? And so we can learn anything. Our craft, the thing we're good at, is creating a pedagogy system for whatever thing we already know how to do. So I know how to play the violin. I can make a pedagogy system for how to do that to somebody else. Or I know how to conduct a band. I can create a pedagogy system, whatever that looks like. And so anything that we can learn ourselves, we can create the pedagogy steps for how to get there. And I think teachers have to remember that they can innovate. They don't have to do it the way they were taught to do it. They don't have to do it the way they learned in their college methods classes or whatever else. But if you have a skill, then figure out a way to teach it. If you don't have the skill, learn the skill first and then figure out how to teach it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
still don't know how to paint.
That's okay.
No, but thanks for being so vulnerable about your teaching studio and how like you've just kept evolving with it, because I think it's really important for people to realize that, it doesn't have to be perfect in the beginning. You just have to start, and you'll grow as you go. And I think everyone has a permission slip to fail 1,000 times right now until they can really find the system that works for them. So I think it's important to empower people to remember that during this time.
Absolutely. And knowing that every student and every parent and every family and every house is just trying their best. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Like, if I have a parent or a student that comes on and says, it's been a really hard practice week. I'm like, yeah, at my house too. Like, this is so difficult. This is difficult for everybody. And what are we doing to make those outcomes the most positive or the most fun and the most successful for our students? And what can we still do to learn? What empathy can we have for the parents in these situations who are trying to work from home, trying to homeschool from home, trying to not lose their house or not lose where they're staying, or even more challenging circumstances. Some of the One of the big challenges I've had is some of my students not having reliable access to Wi-Fi, not having reliable access to a strong enough signal for me to have a, a real-time lesson experience. And I've just had to really dig in with that family and with that mother, especially when do you get your best Wi-Fi? So instead of seeing her little boy at his normal time, I'm seeing them on Saturday morning, and I never teach on Saturday morning, but I'll see this little boy on Saturday morning because that's the only time his Wi-Fi is strong enough for his lesson to happen. And during the week, I'll send him practice tracks, or during the week, he'll send me back a little video that he's created. And it's about prioritizing our student outcomes with what they have available. I know that, like, we sometimes ask, well, what can I do if my students have too weak of a signal? In my school district, I don't know if this is the case for everyone, but in my school district, they are trying their best to make virtual learning work for everyone as well as it can, to the extent that some of them are like checking out hotspots to various students. So it's a Wi-Fi hotspot that they can have in their house. So if they don't have internet access at home, they can use a Wi-Fi, this particular hotspot that they get on loan from the district, or they get a Chromebook on loan from the district so that they can access that. So knowing what other resources are available in our communities for these kids, like if we're talking about teachers from a school district, making sure that the school district is serving all of their students with equal access to internet resources. I think that's really important. If you're teaching at a Title I school where maybe finances are a little tighter with your families, what are you doing to serve those as teachers? What are we doing to serve those teachers or those students? How are we maybe underserving those kids, and what can we do to up our game in when there's an extra need? What else can we do to provide individual support to students that will be successful, but they may need a few extra resources?
Totally. So, can you talk a little bit about your mindset in general going into online teaching, and with everyone having different resources, and what are you thinking about, like, from the very beginning? Is there anything?
Well, I'm prioritizing my relationship with those kids, because if I can't like high five or hug them, or if I can't like come to their house and have a little recital, my relationship and my connection with them is the most important thing, and teaching music is after that. So how can I still have a rapport with those students that they want to learn, that they look forward to seeing me, that they're excited for my class? And so I have found a few ways that I connect with them in in ways they maybe weren't expecting. Maybe I'll show them a photo. Oh, this is what I did in the classroom while you've been gone. Look at I building a tree house in the backyard when you come back to lessons. So connecting with them, knowing that this is a temporary state, that eventually we will be able to have lessons in person again. I think that's really important. I also think letting them know that I'm paying attention to what's going on at home. And I know that there's challenges with practicing, and I know that there's challenges with their family. I've created a bunch of resources. That week off that I had, man, that week off was not a week off. I was working around the clock, but I created some resources for my students. Maybe I'll show it to you because I'm just so dang proud of it. Um,
Yeah, yeah, we'd love to
I,
see it.
I, I created a whole booklet. I said, what's something new and innovative and fun that these kids might want to be that they might that might be a good thing for them. And so I created a whole book called String Me Along. You can see this adorable graphic that we made. This was a resource that I made just for my students. I haven't really shared this with anybody, but this is a resource just for my students. It's like a coloring book, it's an activity book. There's me with a square face. This is how I'm taking their notes for their lessons now. So I have one of the things that I've done that is different in online teaching than for in-person teaching is I've tried to make my feedback to them very concise and very compacted, because interjecting and kind of shouting out while they're playing doesn't work as well on for online teaching, right? And normally if they were here in my office, I could be doing all kinds of like coaching them in by yelling out while they're playing, but the way the Zoom calls prioritize the audio feed makes that less effective. So I created this adorable little character. She's made out of a bridge. Her name is Bridget. She's so
Oh,
cute. But so I thought about what they needed. So we created this is a note shredder, and it's a note actually going in the shredder. And then there's we talk about musical form. So I'm teaching, younger kids. So we discuss elements of music that I can put up on the screen, and it's graphically beautiful, and it's got bright colors. And then I have some coloring pages in here. Here's a coloring page for them that my sister-in-law made for them.
wow.
That's amazing.
Um, I really like this activity. This is a great group class activity. I call this the listen and find activity. I tell them a specific thing I'm going to look for on the page. I say, okay, we're going to look for every time you see this rhythm, we're going to circle it with our red highlighter. And so I can screen share. Oh, you can see that I've done it recently. I can screen share, and every time we see that rhythm, we're going to highlight it together, and they can highlight on the screen. There was one other thing I was going to show you. And there was this fun little thing we made. I call them sight reading layer cakes. And so it's building up a little sight reading excerpt by its own components. So one of the ways I wanted to connect with my students or engage with my students was to meet them with creativity where they are. Like, are we working on sight reading? Are we working on knowing all the names of the notes on our instrument? This is probably like for younger band students. Do you know how to clean your instrument? Do you know how to tune your instrument? Because I can't do that for you now. I can't rosin your bow. Um, I just assessed their needs, and then I tried to respond with creativity about what I could do to meet them.
Well,
Wow.
well, from the looks of it, and just to layer on top of that, it appears that with online teaching, this definitely requires a lot more work outside of the lesson or in preparation for those lessons, which I think is a little bit different from in-person teaching. You have to kind of be ready well before that lesson with all this stuff, and it really shows how much effort you've put in.
Right, right, absolutely.
So.
Yeah. Could you talk a little bit about the specific technology you're using? Like, what apps are you using to share this or to see those things and like write on them on your iPad, or what
Hmm.
mics are you using, or web? I love that webcam with the like bendy
Yeah,
neck.
I
What
love that. I
specifically?
love the fingerboard camera. That one is indispensable. And depending on what instrument you play, you would want a front-facing camera, and then you'd want a close-up of you somewhere, right? Like maybe some
Mhm.
fingering thing you're doing, or a close-up on
Yeah.
your mouth or your face. So I run my classes on Zoom, which is not ideal. I mean, I'll be honest, it has some problems that I don't love, but it works. I use a a camera with a capture card. I talk a little bit about the specs. One of the things that I was really excited to invest in was a set of ribbon microphones, which I had just been using condenser microphones prior to that, and the sound resonance that comes from the condenser mics is not like it's not even in the same league. So if I want to broadcast my best sound quality to my students, if I'm going to demonstrate, that's a huge part of it. I use the iPad with the pencil. I screen share to the Zoom call from the iPad, and I can use the pencil to write on the page or write on the screen. It works the same way, kind of like the whiteboard function. The Zoom has also the whiteboard function.
Mm.
I use YouTube. I use Ecamm Live to create all my YouTube videos because it's very easy to put captions and layers. If you go to my Strings Pop channel, you'll see that I've got stuff flashing up on the screen. I just completely create that in Ecamm Live. I don't do the thing where you record it to the camera and then transfer the file and it's a million pages long to figure it out. I use Ecamm Live. I just go send straight to YouTube. And the broadcast that I create, I'm not putting it like live on a Facebook page. I'm just using it to record and then to post to YouTube. So easy. In fact, if I ever have a student miss their lesson, like I'm here, the Zoom's up, they don't call in. Like maybe they're outside or maybe they got stuck at the grocery store, the line was extra long. I'm having much fewer students not show up to their lessons, I'll tell you that. Everybody's home and everybody's calling in, it's great. And even if they're, normally you'd like be sick, you wouldn't come to your lesson, or if you had to commute or if you got stuck in traffic, you'd miss your lesson. People aren't missing lessons for those reasons anymore, which I think is the dependability of the online teaching is a huge, tremendous asset or a resource as far as that goes. But when it comes to, what was I just saying? I lost my train of thought.
You were talking about a student missing or not calling into a lesson, and
Oh,
then
when they
yeah.
don't call into their lesson, I use their lesson time to make their practice video. So I'm like, oh,
Oh.
10 minutes into their lesson, they're not here. All right, I guess they might not be coming. So I pull up my Ecamm Live. I'm looking at the camera right now. I say, okay, and I make it kind of generic so that it can be for anyone who's practicing that. Let's
Mm.
practice. Let's practice Bach Minuet together. Here's one of the features I want you to work on. And I'll make a 2-minute demonstration video during their lesson time. And then I might send a message back to the parents and say, hey, sorry to miss you today. During your lesson, I made this practice video for you. Hope it works while you're working this week and see you at group class on Friday. And so little by little, in little gaps of time, I'm creating more and more practice videos of all the components I know I want to teach. Like I have a tone warm-up exercise and I have a scale track and all those things. We know what our teaching points are. We already know what we want to teach. So I just little by little creating a library of practice videos and a playlist that the kids can access from home and using their lesson time to make them if they haven't shown up.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Wow, that's great. Well, I think that's
I think that's
all the questions we had. Is there anything else that you want to say for our teachers who will be listening about, I don't know, sending them off into this year where they feel really unsure about what's going to happen? Do you have any closing thoughts on online teaching before we finish up here?
Man, it's intense and it's so difficult. It's difficult for everybody. It's tricky for the kids. It's tricky for us to pivot and do it. It's hard for parents. I have 3 children myself and they're all starting online and I'm looking at that as a working mom and like how am I ever going to be all the things? I'm going to start crying. Sorry guys.
No, it's
How am I ever
okay.
going to be all the things for all the people that I have to be? How am I going to show up as the parent I need to be? How am I going to show up as the teacher I need to be? And this is an unprecedented, strange situation for our generation. We've never been so physically isolated and yet had so many ways of still staying connected in our communities. So the last time we had a pandemic was like after World War One. We didn't have Marco Polo and we didn't have FaceTime. We just had to, stay home. So I would say to the teachers take a real assessment, a look at an assessment at all the resources you have available and find a way to make those resources work for you, and approach every student situation with empathy, because you have no idea what hard, horrible thing is happening in their life, or what terrible thing has happened to their parents, or how they're secure, or if they have housing instability or food instability, or if they can't get their Wi-Fi to work. Like, approach your students with as much empathy as you can bring, and then innovate like crazy until you reach every single one.
Yeah.
It's
Wow.
amazing.
Well, thank you
Amazing.
so much. Can you just say one more time where people can find your materials, find
Yeah,
more about your studio and everything so that they can follow
you
all your
got
stuff?
it. So follow me on Instagram, stringspop.com. No, that's my website. Follow my web. Come to my website and grab my teacher materials. That's stringspop.com. You want to go there. My Instagram is also called Strings Pop, and my YouTube channel is also called Strings Pop. So there's some great stuff in all of those places. I also have a Facebook page, a Strings Pop Facebook page, and I have a Strings Pop teacher hub, a group on Facebook for teachers that are learning about pop music arranging or just online teaching in new genres or different styles, right? With pop music arranging, the music is just the veneer. The music is just what makes it fun. I'm really teaching self-assessing recording and chord theory and music and composition and music technology. I'm really teaching all of those other things. I'm
Yes.
just doing it with the appearance of popular music that makes it really fun for the teenagers.
Yes.
So if they're interested in doing those things, music technology, production, the Facebook group is a good place where I post my live tutorials and videos and resources. I would go with that.
Awesome.
Perfect.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. This was such a great conversation. I learned
Yeah.
so much and
Delightful
It's
to talk to
amazing.
you, and good luck to all the band teachers out there.
thank you
We can
so
do
much.
Thank
it.
you.
Yeah, and good luck to you too with your start to the fall.
Yeah,
We're,
thank
we'll
you.
all we're all gonna do it. So, all right, thank you,
All right.
All
Carrie.
Thank you so
right.
All
Take
much.
right,
care, you guys.
Bye.
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 So I hope you enjoyed that interview as much as I did. I have so many new ideas from Carrie, and I can't wait to try and transform my teaching studio also to an online one. Please give Carrie a shout out and follow her on Instagram or on Facebook. She has her handles are called Strings Pop. That's her program for students that she talked about. And on those, she also has information about workshops for teachers that are totally free. So check those out if you want to work with Carrie. Strings Pop on Instagram, Facebook, and on a website. And her music studio in LA is Gerona Rose. If you want to see a little bit more about what she does, we'll post links to all these things in the comments. And yeah, we are so happy that she agreed to talk to us about everything because, wow, that was great. All right. And then give us a like or share this interview if you think that it's going to be helpful for you or anyone else. We'd love to spread this knowledge to anyone who needs it. And you can find us, Band Directors Survival Guide, at on Instagram. On Facebook, we have a Facebook group and Facebook page, all by the same name. And all of these interviews will be posted on YouTube under our name, Band Directors Survival Guide, so that you can watch them later if you need to. And we'll post like the questions for them and the timing so that you can just kind of click to where you need to go. And then stay tuned to our pages and our handles to hear some more exciting announcements about the BDSG advancement programs and what we're going to be doing in those to make teaching this fall hopefully a little bit easier for all of us. So stay tuned for information on that, and thank you again for watching.